If you followed my channel for some time, you should know shamans are still very much present in modern Korea. I've already explained the basics of Korean shamanism and shamans, and if you missed them, I strongly recommend you to check it out. I'll leave the link at the corner and in the description below. In the Western world, the job of medium, clairvoyant, fortune-telling, and exorcism are considered separate professions. But in Korea, shamans tend to cover all those areas, albeit some would specialize more in one area than the other. But a major part of shamans' day-to-day business is definitely that of a fortune-telling and clairvoyant. Most Koreans would not think to seek a shaman unless they are hit by some inexplicable, potentially paranormal phenomenons. But then, not a small section of the society would enjoy have their fortune told, especially at the beginning of a new year. Indeed, for most ordinary people, that's likely to be the only occasion to get to see a shaman. There are several different arts of fortune-telling, but shamans would usually rely on their clairvoyant power that is said to be provided by the gods they serve. So their fortune-telling tend to be spontaneous and rely more on insights. Today I collect the stories about shamans as teller of people's fortune and fate. 8 allegedly true stories, as always handpicked, translated and narrated by your host, Anthony. My parents divorced when I was little. I and my older sister lived with Dad, and for almost 15 years we totally lost contact with Mom. Starting a new life, Mom didn't mention about the previous marriage and children to her new work colleagues and acquaintances. She was still young, so most of them didn't suspect anything. One day, a work colleague talked about a famous shaman in the area, and Mom ended up joining her on a visit to the shaman with a few other colleagues. As soon as they walked into the shaman's room, the shaman looked straight at Mom and shouted sharply, "Still have a heart to worry about the kids you have abandoned?" Other colleagues had no idea what the shaman was talking about. But Mom fell on her knees and begged the shaman with tears to tell her how the kids were doing. "They are fine. Live far away from here. Girls are smart and work hard. They'll go to the same university. A good one, too." Indeed, my dad moved to a remote countryside with us after the divorce. And indeed, my sister and I entered the same university in the subsequent years. Mom was now flooded with tears. The shaman tusked at her a while and asked, "So, you miss them after all?" Still choked with the tears, Mom silently nodded her head, and the shaman said, "You can't find them. The kids shall find you." That was her last word to Mom. And indeed, about 10 years later, when I and my sister became uni students, we found her. My sister managed to remember the whereabouts of my mom's maiden home, where she had visited much more than 10 years ago. Actually, all the other family members of Mom had moved to somewhere else, but upon hearing what the shaman said, Mom's father decided to stay behind alone just for the case we visit the old address. Mom would still say she never doubted for those 10 years of time that someday we would find her. It's from when I worked as an intern for a company. There was some sort of big event, and after the event was the staff dinner together. Some of the guests to the event, mostly the company owners' acquaintances, also joined, and one of them was apparently a male shaman. There were about 14 of us sitting around one long dining table. I, being an intern, set myself at one end of the table, while the owner and his acquaintances, including the shaman, on the top end. Anyway, I wasn't really introduced to him, and I wasn't paying much attention to him apart from noticing his rather burly build and resonant voice. But then, in the middle of the dinner, the shaman guy stared straight at me and asked across the table,
"Hi, young lady at the end of the table. How old are you?"
Silence fell on the dinner table, and everybody's eye fell on me. Confused, I muttered, I'm 21?
"Ah, you live in Mr. Kim's constituency,"
was the shaman's reply, picking out exactly the area I was living in. And then he carried on.
"Dear, dear, your parents have gone through a lot. You should be nice to them."
Why did you choose that university, by the way?
Better be a head of a dog than a tail of a lion, you know?
Tears started welling up despite of myself. Indeed, that was exactly what I'd been pondering on about at that time. I happened to go to the much higher ranking university than I originally aimed for. It looked like a good luck at first, but I quickly realized I could hardly keep up with the course and the level of fellow colleagues, and I had been taking off after the first year. I was creeped and strangely touched at the equal measure. The shaman carried on.
"And don't reconnect with your old friends. You know what I mean, don't you? They don't add anything to your life."
I just lost words. I went to the middle school with a very poor reputation. Most of mates were dropouts from other, better schools, and I had a real tough time to preserve myself and survive through the rough time. Indeed, I actively blocked all the contacts from the mates from the school as soon as I graduated. The shaman carried on giving me advices about my life and future, and I could just quietly listen to it all stunned. Later, other staffs who had known the shaman guy already told me they knew that he was in contact with his god the moment he singled me out at the dinner, and that's why they kept silent all the while it was going on. When I was about 9, my family moved from Incheon to a small town in Gangwon province. It was for my dad's business, but on my part, having left my old friends behind, I had a hard time to get used to a new environment. Mom got worried about me becoming down and withdrawn, and on our neighbor's recommendation, decided to seek a shaman. The shaman was barely a 20-year-old young woman who just had accepted a god and become a shaman recently. It is commonly said that a shaman shows the greatest power of insight in the first few years, and this young shaman would definitely be such a case. My mom didn't usually care about superstition, but the young shaman was already getting famous amongst the locals that she decided to give it a go. The shaman's establishment was a crumbling old house, which looked nothing like a usual shaman's place. The shaman herself, surrounded by colorful paintings of shamanic gods, didn't look anything like a typical shaman, young, frail, and dressed in normal clothes. Her motion of the throwing grains of rice on the table, too, looked somewhat clumsy. Only then Mom noticed her quiet eyes behind the untidy hair were hazy blue. The shaman was apparently a blind. Feeling more sympathetic towards her, Mom asked an advice about Dad's new business venture as well as children having a hard time in the new school. The shaman took her time, about 20-30 seconds, and first said Dad's business wouldn't go too well, but things would eventually get better should Mom prepare for it. As for kids,
you have 3 kids, and the youngest is a son?
Shaman said. I don't have 3 kids, Mom replied.
The first 2 are daughters, and you say you don't yet have the 3rd child?
Having 2 daughters were indeed correct, but Mom confirmed there was no 3rd child. The shaman kept a calm face and threw grains of rice a couple more times, and said,
Some bad luck for your first daughter, I see.
After fiddling with rice more, she further said,
Coming June, she might meet some water ghost, and in November, a spirit bound to a road would try to take her away. Make sure she stay away from water in July, and don't let her wander around alone in November.
Mom lost words on what to respond, while the shaman shook her head and continued.
If she survive unscathed past November, things will get all right. But if not, expect 3 bad years from next year on.
Having only given gloomy predictions, Mom just left money without a word of thanks. She just told herself it was all just for fun and nothing more, nothing to worry about. Came July. I joined the Girl Scouts camping and nearly drowned in the stream. I slipped on the rock and felt something pulling my right leg deeper down the stream. Came November. Mom tried to keep me home, but under my school bully's threat, I had to go to her piano recital. And on the way back home, I was first hit by a taxi and thrown to another car parked on the street side. It left me fractures on my skull and leg. Especially the fracture on my leg was unusually complicated, and I had to go through 8 operations over 3 years. I also had to suffer crushing headaches and faints for quite some time afterwards. Having seen her predictions coming true, Mom sought the young shaman again, only to find she had already moved away, leaving no contacts. As for the predictions, well, Mom got pregnant 2 years later and gave a birth to my younger brother. So far all her predictions have come true. We had an old shaman lady in the neighbor. Though she kept a separate place for her work, all the neighbors knew what she was and called her Granny Bodhisattva. My father was a lorry driver then. Once on the way, he would be away for days at a time, leaving 3 women, Mom, me and my younger sister, alone home. One day, even before the crack of dawn, the doorbell went off. I checked the clock to find it just about 5 a.m., definitely no time of the day to receive a normal visitor. I got nerves and went out the door. Mom was already there, and my sister followed shortly afterwards. It was Granny Bodhisattva at the door, asking for my dad. Mother replied that he was away for work, and the granny said that she had something to ask him, but since he's not home, it didn't matter, and went away. How odd that she should ring the door at 5 a.m. for whatever reason. But knowing her reputation, we were left a bit shaken. Not quite 10 minutes later, we got a call from father's work colleague that my father had a car accident. We were all shocked and forgot about the granny's visit. Fortunately, the accident wasn't too serious, and my dad survived. Only later, my mother realized the strange coincidence of that morning and asked Granny Bodhisattva why she visited us when she did. But she simply repeated that she had something to ask my dad. My mom suspects that the granny felt something ahead and deliberately woke us up in preparation for the news of the accident. A resident of Cheonju City should know that there's a quarter commonly called Mudang Dong, the Shaman Quarter. That's of course not the real name, but people colloquially call it that because there are so many shamans establishments. My grandma was very superstitious, almost obsessed. She interpreted every step and phenomenon of life from the shamanism's angle. And when I was about 6, she took my mom and I to a shaman in that shaman's quarter. My mom was often ill despite her usual energetic self, and I too often suffered headaches for no reason. And Grandma thought the solution was with a shaman rather than with a doctor. As soon as we walked in, a strange man there, I was too young to know it, but he was the shaman, rushed towards me, shouting, "How dare you!" I was of course terrified, and Mom too was surprised and took me in a tight hug. My grandma alone kept her calm, guess she had enough experience to know something was up, and asked what was wrong. According to the shaman, there was a spirit of a baby girl sitting on my head. He himself was unprepared to see such a thing and unwittingly shouted. But real surprise came with what he said the next to Mom. "Did you kill a baby?" What? What are you talking about?" Mom said. "An unborn baby. It was a girl, wasn't it?" Shaman said. After a few seconds of shocked silence, Mom nodded her head. My family was pretty poor. When Mom got pregnant again after me and my younger brother in successive years, Dad tried to persuade Mom to abort the baby, and Mom reluctantly agreed in the end. She learned it was a baby girl only after she was taken out. Shaman took out a knife and pricked his own finger. Little me closed my eyes tight shut for the sight of the sharp knife and blood dripping from the shaman's finger. But I could feel him waving the knife over my head, and I don't know if I really heard what I heard, but I heard in my ears a little voice whispering,
"Brother, brother."
I still don't understand why I did it, but I bursted into tears and begged the shaman to leave my little sister alone. Shaman assured he wasn't repelling her soul, but simply consoling my sister, and performed a little ritual. The day ended like that, but I think the spirit of my sister is still hanging around nearly 10 years later, seeing my younger brother, who doesn't know anything about the whole thing, mentioning about a crying little girl in his dream. My mom is not particularly superstitious. She'd say it's foolish to mind issues that can't be proven. But she's not exactly a skeptic either, because of what she experienced firsthand. One of Mom's friends is a bit obsessed with shamanism and superstition and enjoys having her fortune told. One day she asked Mom to accompany her to a well-known shaman in the area, and Mom reluctantly agreed. Mom wasn't really interested in the whole thing, so she just sat silently behind a friend while she talked to the shaman. But the shaman abruptly talked to Mom. "I don't know who you are, but I see 2 grannies behind you, one older than the other." Mom, of course, didn't know whatever the shaman was talking about. Shaman continued. "The older granny is short with a round face and a mole above her lips. The younger one is taller with sharp nose and thin lips." Mom was silently shocked because the shaman's description matched how her late mother and grandmother looked like. "They are both caring for you, but the younger granny is complaining about celadon-colored dress. What's it about?" Shaman said, and Mom almost lost her usual composure. Her mother died young. Dislocated during the Korean War, she lived poor all her life. Only in a later year, she managed to splurge on a set of jade-colored hanbok dress that she'd been dreaming on for many years. But she didn't dare wearing it, not even once, before she passed away with a sudden illness. It's the usual custom to burn all the articles of clothing of the dead, but Mom's family was so poor that they reluctantly sold it. Mom cried for a long time after returning from the shaman. She eventually bought a jade-colored hanbok and burnt it as an offering to her late mother. It's from when I was little, probably just 4 or 5. In the small country town I lived in, a young girl newly became a shaman. I don't remember what her exact age was, but I think she was barely in her late teens. Rumor goes that a shaman is most powerful when fresh, and she became somewhat famous in the town. My granny wanted to visit her to have fortune told, but my mom was dead against about such superstitions, and granny stayed away not to create a trouble in the family. One day I was spending time at the senior center in town with granny. I had some bullies in the neighbors, so I was basically taking a refugee there. And coincidentally, the young shaman was invited to the center as she became so popular among the elderlies in town. As soon as the shaman stepped in, she rushed to a grandpa and fiercely berated him, even throwing things at him. I had never seen anybody pouring out temper with such overwhelming charisma, especially unbelievable from such a slight young woman. It left me such an impression that I still remember the scene so clearly, the whole mood and even smell. She fiercely shouted to the old man,
"Do you think a baby's created by the woman alone? Man played a part too, didn't he? And your son just blame the poor girl? You think the ghost of the baby stays with her only? It's hanging to your son's balls too. You damned family won't see another grandchild."
I didn't understand what she meant at the time. Only when I got the sex education in middle school and learned about abortion could I finally put 2 and 2 together. Anyway, for that experience, I don't think shamans and shamanism are all fraud and con. Last week, I visited a well-known shaman. It was not planned at all. The shaman was so famous and usually has a full schedule that one had to book at least 2 months ahead. A friend of my mom booked her time slot with a shaman but could not attend it because of some family issue in the last minute, so she passed on the chance to mom, and I tagged her along. I don't particularly believe in superstitions, but have vague interest in occult, as many do. Anyway, when we got there, we were told one could not bring in an extra company. So I just had to wait outside the room, just playing with the shaman's pet dog. After some time, the shaman came out of the room, seemingly to grab a glass of water, took one look at me, and started talking.
You don't have a boyfriend?
Nope, I said.
Don't lie,
he said. I don't. We broke up.
You call it a breakup? Don't lie to a shaman.
In truth, I was still seeing my boyfriend. My parents didn't approve of him, so I pretended that I broke up with him, but I had to admit the fact to the shaman.
And by the way, why do you hate your dad so much? What do you think you are? Just lounging on bed all day long, looking at your phone and laptop? And try and clean up your room occasionally. You are so lazy you don't even bother washing your face, do you?
I didn't know what to respond, because what he said were all true. I was stirred inside, but still suspected perhaps Mom told him all these. But then the shaman got very serious and said,
Don't you ever do that again. Do you hear?
I didn't know what he was referring and just said, okay, but was shocked by what he said next.
You don't mention death so lightly. Death is not the end, you dumb girl.
Once again, he was right. I have a depressive streak and often thought about suicide, even tried once to slash my wrist. Regardless of my shock, Shaman carried on reenacting things I said about my dad and grandma behind their back. He even mimicked the way I speak when I throw a temper outburst.
That's not the way to talk to your mom. Oh, shut up, mind your own business. Am I bothered, huh?
By then, I was just dumbfounded. He carried on picking on random details like how I need an extra pillow between my legs when going to bed. He also named the exact major I was taking in uni and said,
Stop having a second thought about your major and just focus on. And stop trying to please everybody. You don't make friends by making a fool of yourself.
I must say, he was right once again. I'm contemplating about changing my major, and I've been self-conscious about my socially awkward self and unsuccessfully trying to earn a friendship by agreeing with whatever my mates should say and do. By and by, the shaman talked to me as long as he talked to Mom. He said it was all my luck that he had time because the next appointment was cancelled. Then my dad, who drove us there but didn't want to join us, came in to use the loo. Shaman stopped him and started another lecture.
Is it that difficult to say to your daughter, how about a cinema date with Dad? Love unexpressed, worth nothing.
Dad seemed not paying much attention, but I, having seen the shaman's ability already, was further shaken. As I said, I may be interested in occult, but have never experienced anything such in person. I'm still feeling a bit shaken and cautious. that how a total stranger could know about me inside and out. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. I want to once again emphasize that not every Korean believes in shamanism. It's just like the majority of the most modern world do not believe in or care about paranormal issues beyond the entertainment value. But then, when we narrow it down to paranormals, shamanism is still definitely the backbone of a spiritual worldview in Korea, as Christianity would in the Western world. Have you ever tried to have your fortune told, by the way? If you have, what was the art of fortune telling of your choice? Tarot cards, astrology, or something else? Was it anyway correct or helpful? Let me know down in the comment. If you enjoyed my work, please give it a thumbs up and a comment, and please consider subscribing to my channel. Also to check out my past episodes for all sorts of weird and wonderful stories from Korea. If you want to support me more directly, I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. I'll come back next Sunday. Stay safe and take care.